The massive colony ship Harmony's Dream floated silently through the dark void of space, its once bright hull now scarred and blackened from system failures. Inside the vessel, 3,000 Zephyrian families huddled together in the main corridors as emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls. Communications officer Lyra sat at her damaged console, her blue-scaled fingers trembling as she monitored the increasingly desperate situation. The ship's main engines had exploded during their jump through hyperspace, leaving them stranded in one of the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. The Veil Nebula was known throughout civilized space as a haven for pirates, slavers, and worse. Captain Ross, life support is failing faster than our engineers predicted, she reported to the tall, thin Zephyrian who stood behind her chair. Captain Ross had commanded passenger vessels for 20 years, but nothing had prepared him for this nightmare. His large, dark eyes reflected the stress that every crew member felt. "How long do we have?" he asked quietly, not wanting the families in the corridor to overhear. 18 hours, maybe 20 if we shut down non-essential systems, Lyra replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. They had been broadcasting distress signals for 6 hours, but the Galactic Council's nearest patrol ship was weeks away. The Council maintained that their peacekeeping forces covered all inhabited space, but everyone knew the Outer Rim territories were largely ignored. Pirates operated freely here, and merchant ships traveled in armed convoys or not at all. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple ships approaching from the asteroid belt," announced scanner operator Tom from his station. His voice carried a note of fear that made everyone on the bridge freeze. Captain Ross moved to the main display screen and watched as red dots appeared at the edge of their sensor range. The computer quickly identified the signatures as Kithran vessels, the most feared pirates in this sector. The Kithrans were brutal raiders who specialized in capturing sentient beings for the illegal slave markets. "How many ships?" Ross asked, though he dreaded the answer. 23 vessels, Captain. Mix of destroyers and assault transports. They'll be in weapons range in 5 hours. Lyra felt her heart sink. The Zephyrians were a peaceful people who had given up warfare centuries ago. Their colony ship carried no weapons beyond simple defensive shields, and those were failing along with everything else. Against a Kithran raid fleet, they might as well be completely helpless. "Continue broadcasting our distress signal on all Council frequencies," Captain Ross ordered, but his tone suggested he knew it was hopeless. "Emergency power to the shields. Prepare the civilian areas for possible boarding action." The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of failing systems. Everyone knew what Kithran pirates did to their victims. The lucky ones died quickly. The others faced lives of slavery in the illegal markets that operated beyond Council space. Lyra stared at her communication panel, watching the same automated distress message repeat over and over on the official channels. No response. No acknowledgement. Nothing but empty static from the vast darkness around them. Then she remembered something from her academy training years ago. A forbidden frequency that most communications officers knew about but never used. It was called the Deathworlder channel, and it was banned by the Galactic Council for reasons that were never fully explained in the official records. During her studies, Lyra had accessed old archives from before her time, back when humans had briefly participated in galactic affairs. The records spoke of a species that had appeared suddenly in Council space 50 years ago, offering aid and protection to anyone who asked. But the humans had disagreed strongly with Council policies, especially their passive approach to piracy and slavery. After several heated diplomatic exchanges, humanity had withdrawn completely from galactic politics and returned to their home system. Most species now considered humans to be a myth, a legend told by spacers in bars across the rim. But Lyra had read the official reports. The humans were real, and before their withdrawal, they had answered every distress call they received. "Captain," she said softly, her voice shaking with both fear and hope. "Yes, Lyra?" "There might be another option. The forbidden frequency." Captain Ross turned to stare at her. "The Deathworlder channel is banned by Council law. And besides, humans are just stories told by drunk pilots." "The old records say otherwise, sir. Before they left galactic politics, they had a reputation for helping anyone who called for aid. They never ignored a distress signal." The captain looked at the approaching pirate fleet on the main screen. In 4 hours, Kithran boarding parties would be cutting through their hull. His passengers would face horrors that no civilized being should endure. Even if humans exist, why would they help us? They withdrew from the galaxy decades ago. "Because that's what they do," Lyra replied, remembering fragments from the old archives. "The records say they couldn't stand seeing innocent people suffer. That's why they left the Council in the first place." Captain Ross closed his eyes and considered their options. Official channels had failed them. Their weapons were non-existent. Their engines were destroyed. In a few hours, everyone aboard his ship would be dead or worse. "Do it," he whispered. Lyra's fingers moved quickly across her console, adjusting the communication array to broadcast on the legendary frequency. She had to guess at some of the technical settings, but the old records provided enough information to make the attempt. She took a deep breath and activated the transmission. "This is the Zephyrian colony vessel Harmony's Dream," she said, her voice carrying across the darkness between stars. "We are stranded in the Veil Nebula with engine failure and life support failing. Kithran pirates are approaching our position. We have 3,000 civilians aboard, mostly families and children." She paused, feeling foolish for talking to empty space. "Please, if anyone can hear this transmission, we need help. Our government has abandoned us. The council won't respond. You're our only hope." The message transmitted automatically, repeating every few minutes as it traveled through hyperspace toward the inner systems of the galaxy. On the bridge of Harmony's Dream, nobody spoke. They simply waited, watching the pirate fleet grow larger on their screens while hoping that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone was listening. Deep in the Sol system, the massive dreadnought Indomitable moved silently through the asteroid belt on routine patrol. The ship stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its dark hull bristling with weapons that had never been fired in anger. Admiral James Blake stood on the bridge, watching Earth's pale blue dot through the main viewscreen. 50 years. That's how long humanity had been watching and waiting, monitoring the galaxy from their home system while the rest of civilized space forgot they existed. Blake remembered the heated debates in the Senate when humanity had withdrawn from galactic affairs. The corruption and incompetence of the Galactic Council had disgusted every human diplomat who had dealt with them. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on the old emergency frequency," announced Lieutenant Emma Ward from the communication station. Her young face showed confusion as she adjusted her headset. "It's not one of ours." Blake turned from the view screen. The emergency frequency had been established during humanity's brief involvement with galactic politics, intended for species to contact Earth directly if the Council failed them. No one had used it in decades. "Put it through the speakers," Blake ordered. The bridge fell silent as Lyra's desperate voice echoed through the command center. Her words painted a picture that made Blake's jaw clench with familiar anger. Another species abandoned by the Council. Another group of innocents left to die while bureaucrats on distant worlds filed paperwork and held meetings. 3,000 civilians, whispered Navigation Officer Tom Miller. And the Council won't respond. Blake had served in humanity's last military action before the withdrawal. He remembered watching refugee ships flee from systems the Council claimed to protect, while their so-called peacekeepers arrived weeks too late to do anything but count bodies. It was the same story playing out again. "Emma, can you confirm the transmission's location?" Blake asked. "Yes, sir. Veil Nebula, approximately 40 light-years from our position. The signal is definitely authentic. I can detect the interference patterns from damaged ship systems." Blake stared at the tactical display showing the vast emptiness between Earth and the outer rim. 40 light-years. 3 days at maximum burn for his ships. 3 days while innocent families faced the nightmare of Kithran slavery. "Sir," Emma continued, "should I forward this to Fleet Command through normal channels? They'll want to review the situation and consult with the Senate." "How long would that take?" "At least a week for full authorization, sir. Maybe longer if they decide to contact the Council first." Blake closed his eyes. A week of meetings and debates while children died in the darkness. This was exactly why humanity had left galactic politics in the first place. The Council's endless bureaucracy that valued procedure over lives. "Emma, signal Fleet Command directly. Priority Alpha transmission. Tell them we have a Code 7 situation." Lieutenant Ward's fingers moved quickly across her console. Code 7 was the designation for immediate military response to protect civilian lives. It hadn't been used since humanity's withdrawal from galactic space. "Sir, Fleet Command is responding. Admiral Harris wants to speak with you privately." Blake moved to his ready room and activated the secure communication system. Admiral Patricia Harris appeared on the screen, her gray hair and lined face showing the weight of command. She had been Blake's mentor during the border conflicts 20 years ago. "James, I just received your Code 7 alert. Are you certain about this?" "Patricia, we have 3,000 civilians about to be slaughtered by Kithran pirates while the Council ignores their distress calls. This is exactly what we said would happen when we withdrew." Harris nodded slowly. The Senate will want a full briefing. This could change everything. If we respond to this, we're back in galactic affairs whether we want to be or not. Then maybe it's time, Blake replied firmly. We've been hiding in Sol System for 50 years while the galaxy tears itself apart. How many more innocent people have to die while we debate and delay? What are you requesting? Blake took a deep breath. He knew his next words would either save 3,000 lives or end his career. Full Third Fleet deployment. All Dreadnoughts, all destroyer squadrons. If we're going back out there, we do it properly. Harris raised her eyebrows. James, that's massive overkill for a single rescue operation. You could handle Kithran pirates with a destroyer squadron. This isn't just about rescue, Patricia. This is about sending a message. The galaxy needs to remember what happens when you call humans for help. We don't just solve the immediate problem. We solve the whole problem. The older admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying Blake's face through the communication link. Finally, she smiled slightly. The Senate has been looking for an excuse to return to galactic affairs. The isolation policy isn't popular anymore, especially with the younger representatives. I think I can sell this as a humanitarian mission. How long do I have? You don't wait for authorization, James. I'm giving you emergency command authority under the Defense of Civilian Lives Act. Take your fleet and go save those people. I'll handle the politicians. Blake felt a surge of relief and excitement. Thank you, Patricia. Don't thank me yet. You're about to wake up the galaxy's sleeping giant. Once we're back out there, everything changes. The Council won't like having competition, and every species will want to know if humans are truly returning to galactic politics. Within 2 hours, the Third Fleet began forming up at the edge of Sol System. 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire pirate fleets. 40 destroyers with crews eager for their first real mission beyond routine patrols. Support vessels carrying enough supplies for an extended deployment. Blake stood on his bridge, watching the fleet assemble around his flagship. Earth hung in the distance, a small blue world that had produced the most feared military force in known space. Emma, signal all ships. Set course for the Veil Nebula, maximum burn. Time to show the galaxy what happens when someone calls humanity for help. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth behind as they raced toward their first military action in 50 years. Blake smiled grimly as he watched the stars shift around them. The galaxy was about to remember why humans were called Deathworlders. Warlord Kane stood on the command deck of his flagship Blood Harvest, watching the helpless Zephyrian colony ship grow larger on his viewscreen. 23 Kithran vessels surrounded the disabled vessel like predators circling wounded prey. Kane's scarred face showed satisfaction as he studied the tactical display. Perfect, he growled to his second-in-command. No weapons, no shields, no engines. The Council peacekeepers are weeks away, and merchant convoys avoid this sector completely. We can take our time with this one. First Officer Vex nodded eagerly. His species had evolved from pack hunters, and the thrill of an easy hunt still excited him. The cargo manifests show 3,000 Zephyrians aboard, mostly families relocating to the Rim colonies. The females and children will bring excellent prices on Tortuga Station. Kane smiled, revealing pointed teeth that had been surgically sharpened for intimidation. The Kithran Syndicate had controlled this region of space for over a decade, raiding merchant ships and capturing civilians for the illegal slave markets. The Galactic Council's weak response had only encouraged their activities. Begin boarding operations, Kane ordered. I want the ship secured within 2 hours. Sort the prisoners by age and species. And remember, damaged goods bring lower prices. The first wave of boarding pods launched from Kane's fleet, small assault craft designed to cut through ship hulls and deliver armed raiders directly into their targets' corridors. Kane had used this tactic hundreds of times against defenseless merchants and passenger vessels. On the bridge of Harmony's Dream, Captain Ross watched the approaching pods with growing despair. His crew had done everything possible to prepare for boarding action, but they were artists and engineers, not soldiers. The Zephyrian people had abandoned warfare generations ago. Sir, I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures, Scanner Operator Tom announced suddenly. His voice carried a note of confusion that made everyone turn toward his station. How many ships? Captain Ross asked. I'm not sure, sir. The readings are unlike anything I've ever seen. The energy signatures are enormous. Space around the disabled colony ship suddenly erupted in brilliant flashes of light as 12 massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace with perfect precision. Each ship was larger than Kane's entire fleet combined, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that made Kithran raiders look like toys. On Kane's flagship, alarms began wailing as sensors detected the new arrivals. His tactical officer stared at his screen in disbelief. "Warlord, those ships, they're not in any database. I've never seen designs like these." Kane studied the massive vessels surrounding his fleet. They moved with fluid grace despite their enormous size, positioning themselves between the raiders and their prey with obvious military precision. "Unknown vessels," came a calm voice over the communication channels. "This is Admiral Blake of the Terran Navy. You will cease all hostile actions and withdraw immediately from this system." Kane's blood ran cold. Terran Navy. He had heard whispers of humans in the darkest corners of pirate space, legends told by the few raiders who claimed to have encountered them decades ago. Most pirates dismissed such stories as fiction designed to frighten new recruits. "This is Warlord Kane of the Kithran Syndicate," he broadcast back, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. "You have no authority in this sector. These are our hunting grounds by right of conquest." The human response came not in words, but in devastating action. The lead human vessel opened fire with weapons that seemed to tear reality apart. Brilliant beams of energy sliced through Kane's flagship like it was made of paper, cutting clean through armor plating that should have withstood direct hits from military-grade weapons. Emergency klaxons screamed as sections of his ship vented atmosphere into space. Around him, Kane's fleet dissolved into chaos as human destroyers moved through their formation with impossible precision. Each human vessel seemed to target multiple Kithran ships simultaneously, their weapons firing in perfectly coordinated patterns that left no room for escape or retaliation. Kane watched in horror as his second-largest ship, the Flesh Render, exploded in a brilliant fireball after taking hits from 3 different human vessels. The raiders had expected to encounter a helpless merchant vessel, not the most advanced military force any of them had ever seen. "All ships, scatter." Kane screamed into his communicator. "Emergency jump to hyperspace. Abandon the target." But the human fleet had positioned themselves with tactical genius, cutting off every escape route while maintaining devastating fire on the pirates. Kane's vessels found themselves trapped in a killing field with no way out. The battle lasted exactly 14 minutes. When the weapons fire finally stopped, Kane's proud fleet had been reduced to burning wreckage drifting through space. Only 5 Kithran ships remained intact, and those were badly damaged and completely surrounded by human vessels. On the bridge of Harmony's Dream, the Zephyrian crew watched in stunned silence as the massive human dreadnought moved alongside their ship. The vessel was so large it blocked out the stars, its hull scarred from battles the peaceful Zephyrians could barely imagine. "Zephyrian vessel, this is Admiral Blake," came the calm voice over their communications. "Prepare to receive assistance. You are now under the protection of the Terran Navy. The threat has been eliminated." Captain Ross found his voice after several moments of shocked silence. "Admiral Blake, this is Captain Ross of the Harmony's Dream. We cannot express our gratitude. We thought we were going to die." "Captain, no innocent civilian dies on my watch. We're dispatching repair crews to restore your life support and engines. Medical teams are also standing by if you have casualties." Through the viewscreen, Ross could see human shuttlecraft launching from the massive warships, heading toward his damaged vessel with supplies and technical assistance. In the distance, the few surviving Kithran ships were being escorted away under heavy guard. Kane slumped in his command chair, staring at the ruins of his once mighty fleet. His flagship barely had life support, and most of his crew was dead or wounded. The humans had systematically destroyed everything he had built over years of raiding and conquest. The legends were true. Humans were not myths or stories told in spaceport bars. They were real, they were powerful, and they had just announced their return to galactic affairs in the most dramatic way possible. 6 weeks after the rescue of Harmony's Dream, Admiral Blake stood in his ready room aboard the Indomitable Will, studying star charts that showed a very different picture than when they had first arrived. Red markers indicated destroyed pirate bases. Blue symbols marked new human patrol routes. Green dots showed civilian convoys moving safely through space that had been a death trap just weeks before. The door chimed, and Commander David Hayes entered carrying a thick data pad. His expression showed the mixture of satisfaction and concern that had become common among the human fleet's officers. "Sir, the weekly reports from all squadron commanders," Hayes said, placing the pad on Blake's desk. "The last Kithran stronghold in the Helix system has been eliminated. Captain Lisa Morgan's destroyer group found their main base hidden in an asteroid field. No survivors." Blake nodded grimly. The systematic destruction of pirate operations throughout the sector had been swift and thorough. Human forces didn't just chase raiders away, they hunted them down completely, following every lead and destroying every hideout until the threat was gone forever. What about the diplomatic situation? Blake asked. Hayes activated his personal communicator, displaying a long list of messages. We've received 4 to 7 official protests from the Galactic Council, demanding we withdraw all forces and submit to their authority. Ambassador Wells on Earth is handling the diplomatic response, but the Council is getting more aggressive in their language. Through his viewscreen, Blake could see the construction of a permanent military station in orbit around the gas giant Nexus Prime. Zephyrian engineers worked alongside human construction crews, building a base that would anchor human presence in the sector for decades to come. The grateful aliens had offered their full support after the rescue, becoming humanity's first official allies in 50 years. Any word from the other species in the region? Blake asked. Hayes smiled slightly. That's the interesting part, sir. We've received protection requests from 14 different worlds. The Altarian Trade Federation wants us to patrol their merchant routes. The mining colonies in the Kepler system are offering base rights in exchange for security guarantees. Even some council member worlds are quietly asking if we might extend our protection to their territory. Blake wasn't surprised. For generations, the Outer Rim had suffered under pirate raids while the council's peacekeepers remained safely in the core systems. Now, for the first time in living memory, civilian ships could travel without armed escorts. Trade was booming as merchants discovered they could actually make profits instead of paying protection money to raiders. The council won't be happy about losing member worlds to us, Blake observed. Sir, with respect, I don't think they have a choice. Captain Morgan's patrol yesterday intercepted a Kithran fleet heading for the Vega colonies. 20 ships full of raiders planning to capture civilians for the slave markets. We destroyed them before they could even send a distress call. Blake stood and walked to his viewscreen, watching human patrol ships move through space with purpose and authority. Each vessel represented a promise to the civilian populations they protected: no pirates, no raiders, no innocent blood spilled while bureaucrats debated proper procedures. David, what's the status of our supply lines? Earth won't keep supporting an extended deployment without results. Hayes consulted his data pad. Actually, sir, that's not a problem anymore. The Zephyrians are providing raw materials at cost. The Altarian Federation is handling our food supplies. Local governments are competing to offer us better deals. We're actually operating at a profit now. This was something Blake hadn't expected. The human fleet had come to save one ship, but they had accidentally created an economic boom throughout the sector. Species that had spent decades paying tribute to pirates were now investing that money in legitimate trade and infrastructure. A communication alert sounded, and Blake activated his desk display. The face of Councillor Trix appeared on screen, his purple skin flushed with obvious anger. Admiral Blake, the Galactic Council demands an immediate explanation for your military actions in Council space. You have no legal authority to operate outside human territory. Blake kept his expression neutral. Councillor Trix, we are operating under the ancient right of civilized beings to protect themselves from predators. Every action we have taken has been in defense of innocent civilians. You are destroying ships without trial. You are establishing military bases without permission. You are interfering with established territorial agreements. We are eliminating pirates who prey on helpless civilians while your peacekeepers file reports and hold meetings, Blake replied calmly. Tell me, Counselor, how many distress calls did the Council ignore last month? How many ships were raided while your forces debated proper procedures? Trix's skin darkened further. The Council has maintained peace for 2 centuries through proper diplomatic channels. We cannot allow individual species to take military action based on their own interpretations of justice. Then perhaps the Council should have responded to the Harmony's dream when they called for help, Blake said. 3,000 innocent civilians would have died while you held committee meetings. The transmission ended abruptly as Trix cut the connection in anger. Blake turned back to Hayes, who had watched the exchange with obvious satisfaction. Sir, we just received a priority message from Earth. The Senate has voted to establish the Outer Rim Protection Zone as an official territory under human administration. They are sending civilian administrators and additional fleet support. Blake felt a surge of satisfaction. Humanity's brief return to galactic affairs had already accomplished more than the Council had managed in decades. The protection zone was growing daily as more species requested human security guarantees over Council membership. David, signal all squadron commanders. Tell them to prepare for permanent deployment. We're not just rescuing civilians anymore, we're building something new out here. Through his viewscreen, Blake watched a Zephyrian passenger liner travel safely through space that had been a pirate hunting ground just weeks before. The ship carried families moving to new homes, children who would grow up in a galaxy where calling for help actually brought results. The price of human protection was simple: no pirates, no raiders, no innocent blood spilled while politicians debated. For the first time in generations, that price was being paid in full. 1 year after the rescue of Harmony's dream, the Grand Diplomatic Chamber on Council Station buzzed with tension. Representatives from dozens of species filled the curved seating areas, their conversations creating a low hum of worried voices. At the center of the room, Admiral Blake sat calmly at a simple table, flanked by Ambassador Keeler of the Zephyrians and Captain Lisa Morgan, whose destroyer squadron had become legendary throughout the Outer Rim. Counselor Trix entered the chamber with obvious reluctance, his purple skin pale with stress. Behind him walked the other senior council members, each one showing signs of the political crisis that had been building for months. The Galactic Council was facing the greatest challenge to their authority in 2 centuries of rule. "This emergency session will come to order," Trix announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. "We are here to address the illegal expansion of human military forces and the unauthorized establishment of the so-called Terran Protection Zone." Blake remained seated, his expression calm and confident. Around him, representatives from 43 worlds watched quietly. These were the species that had requested human protection over council membership, abandoning their old allegiances for the security that humanity provided. "Admiral Blake," Trix continued, "the council demands that you immediately withdraw all military forces to your original territory and submit to our judicial review. Your actions have violated numerous interstellar treaties and threatened the peace we have maintained for generations." Blake stood slowly, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Navy. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the chamber without amplification. "Counselor Trix, peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice. For too long, this council has confused bureaucratic delay with diplomatic progress." Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. Many of them remembered years of ignored distress calls and unanswered pleas for help while pirates ravaged their territories. "In the past year," Blake continued, "the Terran Protection Zone has eliminated piracy completely across 50 star systems. Trade has increased by 400%. Not a single civilian has been killed by raiders in territory under our protection. Can the Council make the same claim?" Ambassador Keeler rose from her seat, her blue-scaled features showing quiet determination. The Zephyrian had become one of humanity's most effective advocates, speaking at diplomatic gatherings across the galaxy. "Honored counselors," she said, her melodic voice carrying deep emotion, "1 year ago, my people called for help when pirates surrounded our ship. We had 3,000 civilians aboard, including children who had never known the fear we felt that day. The Council received our distress signal. Your response was to schedule a committee meeting for 3 weeks later." The chamber fell silent as Keeler's words sank in. "The humans answered our call in 3 days," she continued. "They didn't just drive away the pirates. They hunted down every raider base in our sector. They built patrol routes that keep our trade ships safe. They established medical stations and rescue beacons throughout our space. Tell me, counselors, which action represents true civilization?" Captain Morgan activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the Outer Rim territories. Green zones marked areas under human protection, while red zones indicated regions still plagued by piracy and lawlessness. "Counselors, these numbers speak for themselves," Morgan said, her voice crisp and professional. "In Council-protected space, merchant losses to piracy average 23% annually. In human-protected space, merchant losses are 0. In Council space, response time to distress calls averages 18 days. Our response time is 6 hours." Trix's skin flushed darker purple with anger and embarrassment. "These territorial violations cannot be ignored. The Council has legal authority over all civilized space." "Legal authority means nothing without the will to use it effectively," Blake replied. "You had legal authority when the Harmony's dream called for help. You chose not to exercise it. We did." A new voice spoke from the gallery, causing heads to turn throughout the chamber. Representative Nash of the Altarian Trade Federation stood at his seat, his insect-like features showing unusual emotion. "The Council speaks of legal authority," Nash said, his translated voice carrying a slight mechanical tone. "But what about moral authority? My people paid tribute to pirates for 30 years while Council peacekeepers filed reports and held hearings. Since the humans established their protection zone, our cargo ships travel safely for the first time in a generation. Other representatives began standing throughout the chamber. Species after species voiced their support for human protection over council membership. The Kepler mining colonies. The agricultural worlds of the Centauri cluster. Even some core system planets that had grown tired of council inefficiency. Trix looked around the chamber with growing alarm as he realized how many member worlds were openly supporting humanity over the council's authority. "This is rebellion," he declared. "The council will not tolerate the dissolution of our legal framework." Blake smiled for the first time during the session. "Counselor, this isn't rebellion. This is evolution. The galaxy is choosing effective protection over empty promises." Captain Morgan stepped forward and activated her communicator, displaying a message that had arrived just minutes before the session began. "Counselors, I've just received word from Earth. The Terran Senate has voted to establish the Galactic Protection Alliance. Any species that requests our protection will receive it, regardless of their current political affiliations. We're offering membership to every world that values action over bureaucracy." The chamber erupted in excited conversations as representatives realized the full implications of the announcement. Humanity wasn't just challenging the Council's authority, they were replacing it entirely with a system that actually worked. Trix slumped in his ceremonial chair, recognizing defeat when he saw it. Half of the Council's member worlds were already negotiating secretly with human diplomats. The other half were seriously considering it. Blake addressed the chamber one final time, his words carrying the weight of historical significance. "The age of bureaucratic paralysis is ending. The galaxy deserves protectors who act when innocent lives are threatened. We offer partnership to any species that shares our commitment to justice and security." Outside the station's viewports, human dreadnoughts patrolled alongside ships from dozens of allied species, their combined fleets representing a new order built on action rather than endless debate. The rescue of one colony ship had grown into a galactic revolution, proving that when you asked Deathworlders for help, you didn't just get rescue, you got real change.